What is happening? This is Robert Plank from DFYpodcast.com. We are here to talk about you. We are here to make your dreams come true, to make sure that you hit your goals in your business, in your happiness, in your income, in your lifestyle, in your time management, and all those other things that are happening with you in your life. If you can find the chat box to say, hey, I'll be looking at that every now and then, but we are going to be covering some kind of fun stuff, and these are always unpredictable. You never know what sort of tangent that we will go off on. You never know if something in the question box will spark some other kinds of fun ideas, but the main goal here is to have fun, is to show up, is to be consistent, is to do those things that you and I both know makes us money. Imagine if you tried to have a business without having a website at all. And you always wondered, like, what's happening? Why am I not getting traffic? Why am I not getting sales? Because you're not setting yourself up for success. If there were two versions of you, if there was one version of you that only put in 15 minutes a day on a Friday morning, and there was another version of you that spent weeks, months without even thinking about their online business, which one of you would eventually win? Which one of you would eventually strike gold? Well, I would say that if we had the choice between only putting in a little bit of time, but putting it in on a regular, somewhat disciplined basis, versus someone who does not take things seriously and lets so many weeks pass by without moving the needle an inch and then trying to play catch up, I would say that the winner is the one that consistently puts in the time. And so we are talking about you and to you about being consistent. And consistent sounds kind of boring, right? And like saying when something is reliable and predictable, like that doesn't sound very interesting unless you're talking about things like money. Unless you're saying, well, if you can guarantee that you have X number of customers, X number of people on your list, X number of people that will go to your webinars, listen to your podcasts, read your emails, and then if you know that that somewhat translates into some amount of money every month, and then you can say, well, if I know that, then I can kind of then be creative and I can pay the bills and then figure out how to grow things, figure out how to hire who I need to hire. And then even after that, figure out, okay, now that I have this kind of boring, consistent amount of money coming in, now what can I do with that, right? Now, where can I live? What kind of house can I buy? What sort of a vacation can I go on? What kind of a nest egg can I build? What kind of a retirement can I have when you turn something that's predictable but boring into something that then gives you the variety, the fun that you want to have in your life and that you should have. And so here's an idea of the day, okay? Let's just think about this. You only need to be right one time. The real danger is just not trying at all. And haven't you been wrong, incorrect so many times in your life before? I mean, I know that I have, right? You've sometimes you meet the wrong partner, or you have the wrong business idea, or you go down the rabbit hole and you waste time on some project that doesn't really pan out, or the industry changes, or you don't follow through, you don't get to the finish line. We all make mistakes, but you only need to be right just the one time for all those past mistakes and all those things that you did wrong to finally make sense. And it doesn't happen automatically, and it's not guaranteed, but you only need to be right one time. So just think about that. If you're hesitating about putting out content, about posting that YouTube video, or making that tweet, or making that graphic for Facebook, it's okay if you mess up 122 times. If you have the one good business idea that makes sense for you, then you only need to be right one time. And here's something else to chew on a little bit. If you can't look back at your younger self and realize that you were an idiot, then you probably still are an idiot. And if you're like me, sometimes I think back and even like 6 months or 6 years ago, and I really cringe at the person I used to be, or what I said, or this action I took, or if you've ever noticed your Facebook profile posts, like your content from maybe 5 years ago, if you've ever seen an email that you sent out like 10 to 15 years ago and you're like, oh, it doesn't even sound like me. I have zero, almost nothing in common with myself from decades ago, then that's good. That means you've grown. If you're still looking back at the good old days, then that's not where you want to be. So as counterintuitive as it seems, you want to cringe at your past behavior, your past mistakes, your past self. Because if not, then you're probably still an idiot. And I can relate a lot to having the feeling that I think I'm smart enough to know how awkward I can be, but not smart enough to know how not to be awkward. And what's helped me is this thing we're going to be talking about today called podcasting. And podcasting is probably not at all what you think it is, or maybe the stereotypes that have been stuck in your head, or maybe the things that other people want you to feel about podcasting, because sometimes they're projecting or overcompensating. But podcasting kind of can be sort of therapy for you and your business. It can be a way to get your content out there, to get your ideas out there. And then the other thing about podcasting is don't forget about other people. It's easy to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to bust out my microphone and I'm just going to be like, riffing and talking about all these subjects for 3 hours long. The real value in podcasting is in interviews and in getting other people to be on your show and for you to be on other people's shows. And a big kind of life lesson, in fact, that I learned from podcasting is that not every conversation has to be perfect. And it's really easy to meet up with someone in any situation, any context, in person, phone, Zoom, whatever. And then after the call's done, you think, oh man, that could have gone so much better. And you go back thinking about, oh man, I could have made that joke. And I could have said that thing. Or maybe I shouldn't have made this other joke. Or maybe this other thing killed the conversation. You drive yourself crazy pursuing perfectionism. But as far as you know, that thing that you think was a big mistake in the conversation you just made, the other person probably didn't even notice it. And that thing that you said that was really bad to have said, for all you know, the person liked that you said that. And so you have no idea how you're coming across to other people, but letting go of the conversational perfectionism has helped me so much. Just be there, just show up, just do your best, just take some action, just put some things out there, pursue your goals, have some focus, and it can work out. We have Leslie in the chat box who says he remembers when he first came across me and I was selling PHP code snippets. And out there in the audience, you might even not know what PHP code snippets are. We all evolve. We all move over to the next thing. You've had many jobs, careers, and then you've transferred the skills you've learned in profession A into business B, right? Maybe you picked up some website, WordPress, businessy, tax, entity structure skills or social skills or sales skills. We're all here, we're all evolving, and we're here to get you to evolve into the next person that you know that you should be. And have you seen graphics like this on social media? You're browsing your Facebook feed and you see a graphic like this when someone says like, oh, here's me standing on stage and here's these words on the in front of it that has some quote or some cool life lesson. And we've all looked at those and said, sometimes that's really helpful. And instead of having to read some big long article because I'm just on social media, scrolling through and browsing, I'll see this post, and because it's in a graphical format, it's in a condensed format, I'm like, I got a quickie lesson from that without even having to click off of the website. And you need to be posting graphics like this on your social media consistently. It doesn't even matter how many views or likes or comments you get, just be posting something like this consistently. And so we have this podcast, we have guests on, and we'll have this guest like this guy, Mitchell Levy, who I think I interviewed him for like the third or fourth appearance on my show the other day after I think he's just over the past 5 years, he's been on my show again and again. And when he says something that even he doesn't realize is very profound, it's just something he said, we say, oh, we found that, we listened back to the recording of our interview, we found that quote, we'll make a graphic, we'll put it on there. And again and again, it doesn't even matter how many episodes we have, and they don't even need to look that similar. In fact, it's better if there is some variety. And I guarantee you've seen graphics like this on social media from influencers and people like that, where it's bright colors, it's got a photo on it, it might maybe not even have like a hyperlink. It's kind of up to you to either look at the page content or dig in deeper and find the episode, because Mark Zuckerberg, and in fact, anyone that has a social platform, they don't want you linking off every single time to your website. And in fact, they want you to have somewhat of a blend of you give all this value and you have all these things that kind of drive engagement on that platform. And then every now and then you can link off. But a lot of people have social media kind of backwards, right? They think it's a place to drop all sorts of links. Sure, when the timing is right, but for the most part, you generate all sorts of content. But if you're like me, you sit down and you say, let me outline 100 YouTube videos. Let me plan my next 26 tweets. And you never finish. You never get around to it. Versus if you showed up, you had some fun conversations, and then me and my team kind of looked at the quotes and looked at the things that you said and made a graphic for you and posted it on your social media for you. I'm sure there's some price range where that would make sense for you, where it would make a lot of sense to just show up, have conversations, and then the content just gets posted for you. And we can talk about that and so many other things, but our topic today is consistently, reliably, easily grow your business so that traffic, networking, content, and recurring revenue happen almost automatically. So we'll talk about these things. Traffic, which means people coming to your site, right? People coming from Google, from paid ads, or even better, from other people recommending you. Networking, which is just like you knowing people, because you don't even have to have a great idea or the best website or the best offer or anything, but if you know the right people who can get you to where you need to go, that's all you need. And then content, which means that you have something to say. And this way, when you want to put out YouTube videos, or say you want to create a book or something like that, you don't have to scramble at the last minute. You can say, oh yeah, I can pluck this video clip, and there's something to put on LinkedIn today. I can grab this and this podcast recording and get it transcribed, and there we go. Now here's something that can be in a book. So this way you don't have to scramble whenever you want to make a like a freebie opt-in bribe, if you know what that is. This way you don't have to scramble when you make a book or a course or just content for social media or like an email sequence. It's all just things that happen automatically, because you do know that there's just so many tiny little things that need to be done in your online business, right? You need to be sending out emails consistently. You need to be taking orders, following up, dealing with customer service, and all these other things. It's almost overwhelming. And you know that at some point, you need to at least start to make the steps to think about delegating or outsourcing some of this. And not all right away and not all instantly, but maybe start to dip your toe in the water as far as you doing slightly less, right? What if you just did 5%, 10% less in your business and the money remained the same, but you only had to put in 90% or 80% of the time as you are right now? That's at least beginning to be progress for you. And the best communication advice that I ever received is to always circle back to the main point. And this is why repetition is good. And this is why it's good to say, okay, wait, so what are we talking about? Here are the topics. And think about this. If you're overthinking any kind of content creation, even a simple YouTube video, or here today we're talking about a podcast episode, I think it's easy to overthink it because you say, oh, I'm going to have all these tangents. I'm going to have all these 12 subtopics. Just figure out, what are we talking about? What's the focus? What's the main point? What's the title? And anything else we say, sure, we can kind of go and talk about other things, but we make sure we're always circling back around and have we dealt with whatever that point is. And if we're done, then cool, podcast episode is over. And if not, then we still have a few minutes to talk about. And the best sort of writing advice I ever received is to ask questions, because for some reason in school they say you need to write a 3-page essay or a 5-page essay, and you go and you say, I need to write an essay about the Civil War, and Webster's dictionary defines civil and war as these terms. That's no fun for anybody. But what is fun is to ask questions. And so if I were to ask you, for example, how to renovate a real estate property, then if you just say, okay, well, let me just start talking about renovating real estate property, you have no idea where to begin. But if someone asked you, okay, so when you say renovating a real estate property, like what does that mean? What are like 4 or so actions that I could be done? And if I ask you, well, how do I know what is a good real estate property to be renovated? What do I look for? And what's like the first step towards getting started? And what are the additional steps? And if these are just question and you have an answer, and a question and you have an answer, then that's a very straightforward, direct way of getting to the finish line. And these are all little techniques to get you to stop overthinking so much, because I'm sure you can relate. You have an idea, you have a million and one things that you want to do, and you sit down and you get overwhelmed by 50 different ideas, and you take action on none of them. That's no fun for anybody. We want you to have a lot more fun and to instead enjoy traffic, which is paid traffic from YouTube ads, Facebook ads, Google ads. Want you to have organic traffic, which means that if someone searches your name or your industry or your topic or expert in your industry, they end up finding you. And then social media, which means that if someone's just browsing on Facebook, then they at least get warmed up to you and what you're doing. You want networking. And networking means that you have affiliates. You have people that are promoting you, right? They get a special link and they tell their audience that they may have built over years, decades about you. And then they get a little bit of a commission for sending people your way. And those are new customers that you would not have had otherwise, that they kind of send for free with no risk to anybody, because they just send the people. And then if they don't make you any sales or very many sales, they don't really get paid. But then if they make you even one sale or more, then they get a commission. And then you didn't even have to really work very much to get that new person to you. And then, you can get outside of the box and go crazy and have joint venture partners and, work on projects together and have co-businesses and all these fun things. But that this is kind of the slow going part, and that it might feel that, well, man, some people are so good at schmoozing with others, and I'm just not that great. Sometimes I feel like I'm back in high school at the cafeteria, and no one will talk to me, and everyone seems to have found their little groups, and like, why won't anyone talk to me? And then you have these weird flashbacks, even though it's been decades, but now you're trying to make this whole being in the high school cafeteria thing work, even though it's modern day and you're working on your online business. And then content, where we've been talking about content a little bit so far, and you see how the most successful people out there have tons of video, tons of audio, tons of articles, tons of graphics, tons of little video clips. You search Gary Vee, Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, doesn't matter who it is, they have like literally, if you were to try to watch all of the free little videos that's like Tim Ferriss has on social media, how many decades would it take for you to find all little Tim Ferriss video clips? It would take you forever. But the most successful people have just so many little pieces of content out there. Why? Because they only need to be right once, and you only need to be right once. And you think about how you discovered me, or how you discovered like some of the heroes in your life. It might have just been from one random post on Facebook, or some random email that some affiliate sent you. Maybe you did some kind of Google search, and you might have even been warmed up to that person over time, but it was because they had so much content out there, and all the pieces of content, like this little tiny video, like video number 170, appeared to just the right person who found you, and that was the initial piece of content that led someone to find you. And all these things combined mean recurring revenue for you, right? Because it means that there's traffic being sent to your content, which then ends up on your website, which then ends up on your subscriber, someone becomes your buyer, and then you network and you stay relevant, so that way people are always recommending you, people are always talking about you. And you have probably already guessed a little bit that the podcasting, and your podcast specifically, is the jumping off point for so many of these things. And we're going to be talking today about even if you've given up on podcasting, don't want to do podcasting, or maybe you failed at it, or maybe if it could be doing better with it, podcasting on its own first of all, can mean one of a few different things. So you have choices depending on your own strengths and weaknesses, and especially on your personality. But it also means that by just doing this one thing, and it's just this consistent habit, you don't really have to think so much about, well, what are the latest trends on YouTube, or will I get Google slapped? It doesn't really matter. You can just be yourself, put out the content that you want, and then it appears on in other locations. And Leslie says, how did you overcome the self-consciousness of hearing your own voice on podcasts and video? And the thing about you and your fear of podcasting, or fear of how you sound or how you look, it's what we do these days. You go on the TikToks, the Instagrams, everyone's on video these days. It's not a special thing anymore, and you have to keep up, and the only way is through. The only way you can get over just hating yourself on video or hating how you sound is just to do enough of it where you wear yourself down and you just don't care anymore. So find a way to put out enough videos, enough audios where you just kind of shrug it off and like you don't care anymore about how you don't like yourself on video. Just wear yourself down until you're over it, because most people, people will like you or you don't, or they won't, right? And if someone doesn't like you, they're not your customer anyway. And if someone does like you, they can overlook all the things that you think are bad, but don't really matter that much. If you mess up a word, if you stutter a little bit, if you say the wrong word, have a word accent, I guarantee most people don't care about that at all. What they do care about is what you can do for them and how you can help them, and all the good stuff that comes along with them, right? Along with that, you provide a solution, they pay you X number of dollars, you give them 5x or 10x the amount of value in return, you teach them something new, you give them an app or a software or something that makes their life better, and it's up to you to miss out or not, and to hide behind the computer screen and to not be someone who podcasts or appears on podcasts. That's your choice, but you might regret that later when you're scrambling for money. So would you rather be slightly uncomfortable now to be comfortable later and to build up this business that you know that you should build? Or do you want to hide in your hidey hole and not podcast and then wish later on that you'd kind of done a little bit of mental work on yourself and made the money that you know that you can achieve? And so you only need to be right once, especially when it comes to podcasting, especially when it comes to getting guests on your show. And I'm even teaching my new son how to podcast. I want him to be a podcaster because the alternative is to be left out. And it's really easy to just be shy and to kind of let the day pass you by. And we want you to podcast, and you never get the time back. Look at how little this guy is. And if I blink and I wait a few more weeks, he'll be half an inch taller. And if you blink, then years will pass and you'll wish you'd started today. Haven't you ever heard that saying of a year from now, you wish you started today, or the best time, or the second best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, the first best time is today. So just get started, just begin to take some action, just record something, just record a quick video with, like, if you met someone and you wanted to make a 5 minutes explanation of who you are, what you do, why you're different, how you can change someone's life, how they can buy from you, that can and should be your first podcast episode. If someone were to ask you, what drives you crazy about your industry? What's something that you see everyone doing wrong and you're so outspoken about this one thing with WordPress, with websites, with email marketing, and everyone else does it wrong, but here's the right way to do it? Well, that's the second episode of your podcast. We want you to do these things called podcasting, but podcasting isn't what you think. And so here's something that came to mind a few months ago when I was driving. I was listening to different podcasts, and sometimes, like you, I listen to podcasts and I realize, like, oh man, that's a really good point, or like you really chew on an idea. So here's an idea for you to chew on today. Is sometimes people throw around words, right? Here's a word that gets thrown around: stupid, stupidity. have you ever sat down and thought about what that means? Like if something is stupid, like, well, what makes a thing stupid? Like, why is it stupid? How can I avoid stupid people or being stupid myself? Well, here's a little bit of a diagram here, is where the actions that you take could either benefit others or hurt others, and then they could benefit you or hurt you. Does that make sense? Like sometimes you can do something that's like generous for someone else or like helpful for you, but it's kind of a combination of those things, right? You take some kind of an action, you steal money from someone. What does that do? It helps you, but it hurts them. You give money to someone, but you can't afford it. It hurts you, but it helps them. So there's the concept of benefiting or hurting others, and then benefiting or hurting yourself. And so I was driving, and they explained this diagram here, where they said, so here's the thing. If you benefit others, but you hurt yourself, you're a giver. If you benefit others and benefit yourself, then you're a smart person. That's where you want to be. But then stupidity is where you hurt yourself and hurt others. So this is like, have you ever come across someone that talks you out of something that you really should be doing, and they're kind of mean and nasty? Well, that's like a stupid action, right? Because it hurts you because it makes your life worse, but then it kind of hurts them too because they also don't get to share in the benefits of you like being a happy, successful, fulfilled person. And then there's also bandits, which is where someone can benefit themselves at your expense. So you think about like these four sorts of quadrants, and you think, okay, where I want to be is to be a smart person, or I want to benefit others and benefit myself. And then ideally, this is like kind of like an uphill spiral, where if you get paid for your expertise, you help someone else, they buy your course, they buy your coaching, and then they improve their business, and that motivates you to continue. That's what it means for you being a smart person. So all this to say, smart equals benefits yourself plus benefits others. And there's all these ways to go wrong. You be a giver, you be stupid, you be a bandit, but the place to be a smart person, which I know you are and can be and should be and will be, smart equals benefiting others plus yourself. And I say this because your job sounds bad, but your function, right? Your purpose as a podcaster is to be a smart person, which means you benefit others plus yourself. And you also bring on a guest on your show, and you make your guest look smart. You make them look like someone who, they are benefiting from being on your show, but they also help other people by giving advice, giving stories, saying what not to do, explaining resources, explaining stories, explaining problems. And you, in turn, look like a smart person for having discovered this guest on your show. And so going off on a little bit of a tangent, for a while, I was a host of this podcast on the Entrepreneur.com website, right? This is a podcast called the Action and Ambition Podcast. And the thing to notice is that I tried to resize my screen, but I realized as we were halfway through that the screen sized back down. Look at the dates on this. These guys, and I'm not with them anymore, I was for a while, but they publish twice a day. Twice a day, there is a 20 to 30 minute podcast episode. 2 guests a day. That's 60 guests per month. That's 600 plus guests, or that's 700 plus guests per year if they do it on weekends. Wait, okay, I don't think they do. So let's just say like 500 or 600 guests per year. So they were doing like mass numbers, mass quantities, and they're hosted on the Entrepreneur Magazine website. And so in this kind of little bit of a, I don't know, like just a fun sort of side gig for a while, I interviewed this guy that he owns like 12 law firms. I interviewed some lady that she specializes in luxury real estate in the Atlanta area. I interviewed a super young guy who was selling this like little box, this appliance that you plug it in to your internet connection, and it provides like Wi-Fi access to anyone around you, and you get paid like a few pennies for doing that. So we interviewed all sorts of people from all walks of life who were looking to get publicity about whatever their company was, whatever the new venture was, and they were looking to get ranks on the Google search results when someone searches for them. They were looking to get credibility because that way they are, linked to from Entrepreneur Magazine. They were looking to get just sort of some education out there for their future prospects. Because if you hear about such and such person who's really skilled with luxury real estate in Atlanta, but you're not really sure about this person, you're not even at the point where you're maybe going to call this person, what if you found a podcast episode where they explained what it is that they did? And same goes for the guy selling the weird box that plugs into your internet. I mean, in this day and age, how many times when you were going to a restaurant, haven't you like seen like what's the address and what does the inside and the outside look like? Well, we research things before we take action. And so if someone out there is creeping on you and they're saying, I don't know, should I contact this person, or are they credible, or should I buy their book or go to their website or buy their course or buy their coaching, they're looking into you. And if they find an interview where you were on a podcast, well, first of all, you'll get points just for showing up. So whatever hangups you have about your own voice, accent, mistakes, whatever, just because you showed up, you'll stand out from so many other of your competitors, or who you think are your competitors. And it's a thing that you need to do, and it's a thing that just is done nowadays. Where you could try to appear on TV, and that's the situation where you have to kind of go and teach their topic. So like if the local news wants to teach about cyberbullying, then you have to talk about cyberbullying. You only get like a minute or two, and then how do you really make sales from that? And then you might say, well, I really want to get like big speaking gigs. Well, that seems really scary, first of all. And well, how will you get those? You need to get known first. So you need to look like a smart person by having a podcast and being on a podcast. And a podcast just means a one-on-one conversation for 20 minutes. And there's crazy podcasts out there where they'll go for like 3 hours and 6 hours, and they try to be like Joe Rogan, and they'll just talk on and on about any and all kinds of subjects. But why would you go to all that trouble? Why would you talk for 3 hours when you could talk for just 20 minutes? And there's all kinds of goofy podcasts where like they'll watch the Star Wars trilogy or like the original trilogy, and every episode will be 1 minute. So they'll watch like minute 25 through 26 of The Empire Strikes Back, and it'll be an hour-long episode, and there'll be like 5 people just cracking jokes. But how does that make money? What does that really lead to? So instead, a one-on-one conversation with some expert in your industry that you have on your show for just 20 minutes. 20 minutes is an ideal length. 20 minutes means you can fit in all the things that you want to fit in, but it won't take up too much time, and it won't give you so much time where it'll be awkward. You won't tire yourself out, because if you had to show up on some kind of call and be there for like 4 hours, you'd get so tired you wouldn't want to do it again. But you could do 20 minutes. You've probably spent longer than 20 minutes just driving to the store sometime this week. So 20 minutes, and it's also good for people who are listening to your show, because that's like a commute time, or it's like a riding the train sort of length of time, where 20 minutes is good for you to just get the conversation happening. And then here is why people are showing up on your show, right? Because here comes the self-doubt again. Oh, but it's little old me. Why would even a single person want to be on my podcast? Because you are the kind of person that promotes them forever. One of the best things that has happened in your guest's life is them finding you and then being on your show. So I'm trying to think of like who's like a name that you'd recognize who would be on my show. But I've had like this guy who was on recently. He has this book called like The Wisdom of Walt, and he teaches all these like leadership lessons from Walt Disney, and he's like the super famous guy. He was a professor at UCLA, and he recently retired, but he teaches all these like Walt Disney leadership techniques. So here's the thing, is I think he's been on my show 3 times. He was on my show, and now I promote the episode to my list of business people, internet marketers, entrepreneurs just like you. And then if someone Googles his name, they find so many podcasts he appeared on that someone says, whoa, this guy, he's really established as far as his name, his company, the things he talks about, and I kind of benefit as well, because if this guy is an up and comer, if he's rising in the ranks, then now I can rank in Google for his name. And you usually think of this as like a big no-no, right? You usually think of like, oh man, if someone else has a name out there, I don't want to be like ranking, like if someone types in like Tim Ferriss or Gary Vaynerchuk or something, to use like an extreme example, and I come up like Gary Vee wouldn't like that. But if it's him being on my show, then that's different. Then that's okay. And if you know people out there who have brand names, who have company names, like I have had people from like AWeber, if you've heard of that company. I've had this guy named Mike Volsame on a couple of weeks ago. I've had a few names that you might have recognized, and they all have like company names or like names of their books or things like that. And if you were to try to like use someone else's trademarked book name, that's not good. But they are okay with it. In fact, they love it because they appeared on your show, so they are a part of it. And there's of course like a link back to their website, but it also helps you. And a good way to think about it is kind of like talk shows, right? If Jason Momoa wants to promote some latest Jason Momoa movie, then he'll appear on Jimmy Kimmel, which helps everyone else, right? It's the smart concept. Helps yourself and helps others because it promotes Jason Momoa himself, promotes this latest Jason Momoa movie, promotes the talk show that he's on, but the talk show also promotes the guest, and everybody wins in that case. And so that's what you need to be thinking about with podcasting is who can you get? And it doesn't even need to be someone that's like worldwide known. It can be an up and comer, or it can be lots of maybe like mid-level guests. And the thing I've noticed too is that some of my more famous guests are really they don't really give that good advice because they don't have to, right? They're just there because they say, hey, here's me, I'm awesome. And they don't really share anything super duper profound because they don't have to. But the people that are maybe more of up and comers and they're hungrier and they're still making their mark in the business, they want to give you the really juicy, valuable content. So you think about this is you can enjoy the traffic from other people's names and companies because they were on your show. And don't worry about celebrities. Interview authors and podcast hosts because any podcast host wants more listeners. And what's the ideal listener for their podcast? A listener of another podcast, such as yours. Authors are always looking to sell more books. And don't worry about being exactly in the same space. Like, I mean, even like earlier we used an example of like a real estate podcast, right? Well, if you had like a real estate course, you could interview different types of real estate investors, other types of real estate entrepreneurs, different realtors in specific areas. You don't have to be exactly in the same space. And don't even worry about being specific or general. Now, general means I'm going to have a business podcast. We'll talk about anything business or anything entrepreneurs. That's like too general. And then too specific is if you say something like, this is going to be like a copywriting for websites podcast. Well, then you're almost limiting yourself to like giving little tutorials. And what kind of guests would you have? And say you want to be known as like a website copywriter and you interview other website copywriters. Now you're kind of like interviewing your competitors. So instead, figure out somewhere in between there and have more of kind of an umbrella niche where you can talk to, many people who are like time management experts, or many people who are like my show is called The Marketer of the Day. And the concept here is that like everyone is a marketer in their own way, even if they don't think that they are. And so now I can interview many people from different kind of industries, and kind of the focus is just on like overcoming your own hangups and your own sort of shyness. So don't worry too much about the types of people you'll get are getting like the most highest quality types of people. Just take some action, get some people on your show. And you will get excited if you start to kind of think about like, okay, like, because I've had like John Lee Dumas on my show, if you know who that is. I had a guy who was like the rideshare guy. He teaches Uber. This other guy from a company called Jungle Scouts. This lady who has a platform called Meet Edgar. Another guy who has a really popular service called Zapier. So when you think about this concept of the umbrella, well, what companies do you already pay money for your business? And don't say like PayPal, but say if you use some kind of an app that like uses PayPal. And don't say QuickBooks, but if you use some kind of app that helps fulfill some kind of function with your e-commerce business, the worst they can say is no. So think about vendors that you know. So I have a few doctor clients. And I mean, think about all the vendors that doctors have, right? Doctors, people sell like different kinds of machines to doctors. People sell different kinds of marketing services to doctors. Think about vendors, authors, podcast hosts, app creators, influencers. And here's where it gets so much of a duh moment, you'll wish you thought of this. Interview your best customers on your podcast. And if nothing else, let's say you interview like 10 of your best customers over the years, whatever criteria that means to you, right? If you think that means those that have been around the longest, paid you the most money, best results, most active, most recent, just 10, or like just the 10 that pop out to you, 10 of your best customers. What if you interviewed them on your show and it just was a total failure, right? You got almost no traffic, almost no extra sales, but those 10 people, now they're kind of like business married to you in a way. Now you have stood out to these 10 customers of yours so much more because you're probably the only person that's interviewed them, so they're sticking around forever. So at the very least, interview your 10 best customers because that's going to help everyone in that situation. Interview your friends, interview your prospects, interview people who maybe won't buy from you but can tell their friends about you. And so right now, a little bit of a tangent here is I am trying to, and I've gotten a few customers of this project me and my wife have called Done For You Narration. And my wife narrates audiobooks for people that already have Amazon book but want an audiobook. And I've interviewed some book publishers, and not for the purpose of the book publisher buying from us, but the book publisher recommending to all of her customers that have books for an audiobook. So you don't even necessarily have to interview someone and hope that they'll buy from you. It's kind of the idea of you might befriend a hot girl or a hot guy, not to date them, but because they have friends, a friend or two that maybe you could date. And just in general, people that you want more access to. And I told you about a few of kind of somewhat high profile marketers that I've had on my show. Like I've interviewed a guy named Ted Thomas, who is really huge on these things called tax liens. The thing about some of these people, like, they'd never give you the time of day. If you said, oh, can we get on the phone? Can you coach me? They'd never give you the time of day. But if you say, can you just be on my podcast and I'll interview you and I'll promote you forever? Suddenly they want to talk to you. Suddenly it's okay to have that conversation because, well, they're talking about themselves. And here's something else to think about is it's just 20 minutes. And what can really be accomplished in 20 minutes, right? Let's say that you spend 20 minutes writing a blog post. You probably won't finish it. You spend 20 minutes playing around with Facebook ads. How far can you really get until maybe you would finish one ad and maybe that would work and maybe not, and eventually you'd even have to create more ads versus 20 minutes, this person is on your show and now they rank and now you do all this work for them where now you publish the show and they get promoted forever and ever. That is a very good use of their 20 minutes of time. So you would be surprised at how many people that would never even talk to you at all ever, but you have them on your show for 20 minutes and now so much has changed. And I think like I have these customers that I think they interviewed like Tony Robbins' son, Jarek Robbins, and Mark Victor Hansen, and these kinds of people. And they're not even that well known in their space, but they asked the question and they got the person to show up on their podcast. And here's something else, is I was doing this a bunch of years ago and I didn't even realize what I was doing until recently, was that we talked about that whole concept of being in high school, being in the cafeteria, it's awkward, no one wants to talk to you. Have you ever gone to networking events and maybe like small meetups or large conferences, or maybe even like these online Zoom things, and you go there and you meet a person or two and you really don't get a lot out of it? And maybe one person monopolized all your time, or maybe you met 10 people and you got 10 business cards and you clean out your wallet and you throw away 10 business cards in the trash. And you know that there were people at that networking event who they cleaned up, right? You know someone went to that networking event and made like 10 sales. You know someone made like $500 or $5,000 just from this sale and that sale. You know someone did. What are you missing? Why didn't you get what they had? Well, here's the answer. It's that you didn't follow up. And some people are like naturally charismatic and some people can make the sale right then and there, but there needs to be more follow-up. There needs to be more of a predictable system like we're talking about here. So what if you went to whatever networking event and anyone that you met, you made sure it was a quick conversation, and if they said something interesting and they said something that was unique, like they said, oh, well, I teach real estate. Oh, that's great. But I teach this exact thing. Like we mentioned Ted Thomas, I teach how to make money from this thing called tax deeds. Awesome. That sounds wonderful. I would love to interview you about that on my podcast. Let me get your information. Cool. Move on to the next person. So what does that do? Well, the person that was talking to you, now they didn't waste their time because that led to you helping them promote them. And then you actually made some of these connections. Instead of meeting 5 people that you'll never talk to again, now you met 20 people that can become part of your inner circle forever and ever in so many things that you do, because you're permanently there on that podcast recording. And you kind of gobble up this universe of people out there that you want to, be associated with. So the master plan: create your podcast and some starter content, even just 3 quick episodes. You contact these people we've been mentioning. You contact your inner circle to be interviewed. You don't make a big deal about it. You say, let's show up, let's meet in a Zoom meeting like this. It'll be face-to-face, and I'll ask you some questions. No plan, just tell me about your business. You meet, you ask questions, and every time it's almost the same questions. And at the end, you promote the URL, just like in a talk show. They promote whatever the latest movie is, and then you say bye. And then you produce the recording, you upload it, you market it forever, and then you build this kind of list of your people you're associated with. And maybe you can get coaching from them or vice versa, or maybe you can promote each other, or maybe they know of a speaking opportunity you could then be at, or vice versa. But now you have this deep connection with someone who is serious about their business because they actually showed up on a podcast. And so many people don't take this seriously, and they're too afraid, and they let the fear win. And most people don't know that we're all faking. And, the fake it till you make it is kind of a cliche, but we're all insecure. We all only have 70% of it figured out. And there are people out there that are taking the chance, and they know even less than you. And they're even less successful than you. And they're even less skilled than you, but they are going out there and they're taking the chance. And then the real goal here is, if they have a podcast, get on their podcast. Right? And then now you can promote your show on other shows, and now everybody wins. And so, and what happens, I get emails like this all the time when someone says, and there's a lot to read, but basically in this screenshot, in this email, someone says, hey, I've got this guest, Kevin Snow, and here's his bio. And this is literally all they say is, here's a quick 3 sentences about this person. Here's a few ideas of what he could talk about. Here's some links of him on other podcasts, and that's it. Let's make it happen. And then I'm about to reply to this, or have my assistant reply and say, cool, here's the link to meet. We'll meet. they'll spend 20 minutes with me, and then I will promote this person forever, and then I will be associated with whoever this Kevin Snow person is forever. And I've developed some lifelong relationships, got some high-dollar recurring clients from this, and vice versa, just from many of these podcasting appearances. And here's another example, is I have a long time client, Dr. Barbara Hales, who we like each other, we've worked a lot together, and she pays me monthly to run her podcast and to get all these other doctors. She teaches doctors how to be entrepreneurs, and I kind of go and find her speaking opportunities on other podcasts to further grow her podcast. If someone shows up on your podcast as your guest, then it's not much of a stretch for you to them be a guest on their show as well. And if you are a podcast host and someone can, and you have a lot of awkward interviews, but you have one that's like really good or you like it a lot, now you can show how great of a podcast conversationalist you are based on that one that happened to be really well, and you just cherry pick the one that you liked. So the hang up is always, okay, I have someone on my show, what do I ask? Here's what you do. And we said before, people have a bio like this. It says like, Kevin Snow is the founder of Time on Target. He helps businesses take their sales and marketing automation processes to a higher level. So I'd click the record button and I would say, hey, we have Kevin Snow on the show and he does this and here's his company. Hey, Kevin, welcome to the show. And then he'll say, hey, I'm glad to be here. And then I say, Kevin, what has you fired up the last 6 months? What are you passionate about? What are you excited about? And he might have whatever answer, right? Oh, it's about my business. It's about this new project. It's about this new win we've had recently. There's so many ways to go, but it's an easy question to answer. And you don't even have to like fully, deeply listen to the answer. Just kind of like be like, okay, well, I'm hearing what they have to say. Next, you ask, now that we know about the recent activity you've been doing, what problem do you see in your industry? What drives you crazy? Where does everyone else go wrong and where do you go right? And then that's easily a 3 to 5 minute answer. And then now that we've said what has them excited, where others go wrong, we say, what solution do you provide? We've talked about the bad. What about the good? How are you different? And what is it that you do? And now this is like the easiest question in the world because people love to talk about themselves. And this is the reason why Kevin is here, right? Kevin is here to talk about his company. So of course he'll have tons to say. And now that he's rattled off like how he's different and now we kind of get, okay, here's what he does, but maybe if someone was listening to the episode, they wouldn't quite be ready to buy or even click yet, right? They'd just be like, okay, I'm still listening to Kevin does automation. And I say, hey, Kevin, what's an easy win for someone in this industry to see results? And if Kevin's talking about automation, he might say, well, add a Facebook pixel or, build a list, get 10 people on your email list. And so if someone's listening, they're like, that's doable. I can do that. It's not overwhelming. And if I'm the kind of person that has always been looking into like e-commerce automation or something like that, I say, I've been so overwhelmed, but like this guy on this podcast, finally, he's the first person I've listened to that has something that's like doable. That's like kind of, it makes sense, but I can actually like take action on it like today or this week. So that's a really fun question. And then as we're winding down, I say, well, you know what, Kevin, I'm just a layperson. I don't know about, like, you're the expert, you know about all this automation stuff. Did we leave anything out? Like, did I forget to ask you something that you wished I'd ask you? And then this is Kevin's chance to really shine because we've talked about recent passionate actions. We've talked about problems in his industry, how he's different, an easy win someone can take, and then whatever's missing, whatever's left out. He might have some kind of like advanced technique that we just throw in there real quick. And then I say, well, like, what's next for you, Kevin? Like, now that you've done all these things, like what you talked about the present and the past, what's happening in the future? And he'll say, oh, well, we have like this new thing coming out or some new project happening soon or some new price point or some new feature. And then I say, how do we find out more about your company and what you do? And this might seem kind of like a lot to kind of remember and hold in, but just I ask some variation of these questions every time. And it doesn't change that much. And it's just kind of different things to get someone talking and to move the listener kind of from point A to point B. Point A is, I don't know this Kevin guy, to like, okay, I'm kind of impressed with him, he's demonstrating value. And point B is, now I want to go check out Kevin's website and find out more about him and what it is that he has to do. And so the kind of the punchline here, the website, the service, the thing that I'm leading you to is this thing called DFY Podcast. DFY stands for Done For You. So DFYpodcast.com is what we're talking about, where we set up your podcast and run your podcast for you, so that way you can be asking these very simple questions that, I mean, if you're really nervous about it, print out, screenshot this, or if you email me, I can send you these questions in this slide, and print it out, have the piece of paper next to your computer, and just ask these questions. It's the silliest thing, but I guarantee that you don't really need to ask much more than this. And if you just kind of listen to what their answer is and in a way repeat back to them, that way you understand it, it's the silliest thing. People will think you're so smart if you just repeat back what their answer was in your own words. It shows that you understand, and they'll be like, oh, you're such a genius because you said the same thing that I just said to you. We're so alike, we're so similar. It's one of life's cheat codes, at least I think. And so we talked about like that Action and Ambition podcast. And I mean, podcasting takes all kinds of different shapes and forms. Like, for example, we have a client where we run a podcast for them. I don't know if it shows up on here, but we run a weekly podcast where we just talk about, if I can find the right link, where are we at? So their podcast is Watertown 365, and what we do is every week we talk about the local news that's happening in their town. So we post like memes and things like that, but somewhere is here we go. Here's a video of me. Welcome back. It is already, I'm here on camera, and I'm just kind of like reading the news. And I'm clicking on local news stories and just kind of talking about what is happening. And we're working on interviewing local business owners in his town. That's kind of the next iteration on this. But we make all these kinds of videos where they don't get like, hundreds of thousands, but they consistently get hundreds of views just from us showing up and speaking some of these things out. And if I click over on like the weekly engagement, sometimes we get thousands of people liking, viewing, reacting, commenting to some of these weekly kind of news-based podcast episodes. And like it's on video, we put it on Facebook, we put it on YouTube, we put it out there on Google and Apple and iHeartRadio and Stitcher and Spotify and all these other places. And so a podcast can take all these different forms, can't they? A podcast could be the latest news in your town, but it can also be just you unpacking a topic, but it could also be you interviewing some other guest about what it is that has them passionate, has them fired up. And so the topic and the vision and the strategy, that part's up to you. And you can probably relate to being so hung up, so busy, so spread thin, putting out all the fires, trying to say, I want a podcast, but how do I find music? Or how do I, what equipment do I need? Or how do I edit all the ums out? Well, let me make it easy for you. DFYpodcast.com, Done For You Podcasting. You give us up to 20 podcast episodes per month, and we produce it, which means we take out the background noise, we make the audio sound great, we do all the nooks and crannies so that way Apple and Google and all of these podcasting platforms will accept your podcast. We add music, we put it on all the platforms where you want to be located on, because you know how this is. You don't post to just one platform, and you post to all kinds of other areas, and you might focus on like Facebook. I know that's my favorite, but I always forget like LinkedIn's out there, and I always forget like Instagram's out there, and you just tell us where your accounts are, and we'll post a graphic to Instagram. and we'll post a video clip to LinkedIn, and we'll post the link to Facebook, and we'll make the blog post on your WordPress site, and we'll add text underneath kind of summarizing the timestamps, the links, the important points, the important quotes. We'll do all that stuff. You just have to show up. If you want us to remove the ums, you want us to make your YouTube description super nice, you want us to name your podcast episode, you want us to create these social graphics that I showed earlier where there's like an image and there's some text on top that has an interesting quote from the episode. We can do all these things, and all you have to do is show up. We write tweets for your episode. We write a promotional email for your episode. Have you ever heard like, you're not emailing enough, you're not building a list? Well, every podcast episode that you put out, if you end up with like 20 interviews, 20 shows, that's 20 emails you could be sending to your list. That's like 20 weeks of things to keep your email subscribers warm. We submit your show to 50 podcasting directories. We can either post your episode right on Facebook or stream it out on Facebook Live. We promote your show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you give us your autoresponder email, we can even send the email out to your audience. All for, at the moment, we always increase the price, we always play with the pricing, $245 per month. You can cancel anytime. 2, just have a show where all you have to do is just show up. You're there, people come onto your episode, you have this conversation, you ask these 6 questions that we just laid out for you, and now everybody wins. Now you have this show that's posted in all these different ways to all these different platforms. Now you're free to think up this strategy of new people in your universe to contact, of new topics to talk about. And then now you just have all this social content that's posting all the time, all this YouTube content, all this Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok content, wherever you want to be posting to, because as you know, the heroes in your life or the heroes in business that you've come across, it all started because you found one quickie video clip of them somewhere. And so you need to be consistent and you need to be doing things on a massive scale to be heard. But sadly, so many people out there get Google slapped, Facebook slapped. They have a YouTube channel and you go and you look and it's like 0 views, 0 views. Here's the thing, is it doesn't even matter what rules change on Google, Facebook, whatever, because first of all, you're on multiple platforms, but also because you're growing your network. So here's the thing is, if Tim Ferriss appeared on your podcast and after he was on your show, you said, hey, Tim Ferriss, because you were on my show, can you send a tweet about it? Or can you send a message to your email subscribers? Now traffic doesn't matter. Now getting slapped by any platform, any rules they have does not matter because you had a guest on your show and then they promoted it for you. And so many times it's easy to discourage yourself because you'll see a Facebook post and it has like 1,000 comments, but you don't know what they did to get those 1,000 comments. They might have thrown $5,000 in ads to that. They might have asked 10 of their influencer friends to promote that. So many things are happening behind the scenes where you might think like, I don't think that marketer makes a lot of money, but little do you know, they have like 20 coaching clients behind the scenes. Versus you might see someone that looks like they have huge amounts of numbers, but then they're using all kinds of Twitter bots to inflate the numbers. So you really don't know. And the person to focus on is you and yourself, and how you can do these things that you know are important, you know you should be doing, you know you need to be having a podcast, you know you need to have a message and to get yourself out there so that way people sit up and pay attention to what it is you have to say. That way they become your subscribers, they become your buyers, and because you become known for some of these things, right? You become known for being good or the best at what your niche is, even if it's Atlanta luxury real estate, or if it's this goofy internet sharing type of box. And so you need to have a podcast. We both know that you do. And what I can almost guarantee has held you back from your podcast is either the technical difficulties of look at all this. I'm overwhelmed looking at this. And that's why I have 10 employees on my team to do all this for me and my podcasting clients. And I want you to be one of them too. Because what we do is we set you up on this chat room. And this is called Slack. And it's basically just an app. You put it on your phone, put it on your desktop. I think there's a web version too. And what happens is, say you say, I just had a show, and here's the recording, and here's the picture of my guest. Work your magic. Put it on the social platforms, put it on my site, put it on the podcast platforms, put it on YouTube. Let's just make it happen. And this is what I want you to do for us. I want you to just go into the chat room, and I want you to say, here's my recording, go to work, go do your work. And if you say, here's 5 recordings, now we have the next 5 weeks worth of content, then do that. And so we want you to be in this chat room so that way me and my team can just make your podcast happen. And so we said that the technical problems and all the different moving parts, maybe that holds you back. But you know what held me back a couple of years ago, or even a year ago, is just the time factor. Is, you say, all right, well, I need to spend this time being on a podcast show, and that's 20 minutes. But then I ended up spending more time than the 20 minutes on just like adding in music and fixing up the audio quality and formatting it for podcasting platforms and uploading it to all these platforms and making all these graphics and doing all these social posts. I would do like a 20-minute show, but then end up spending like 2 or 3 hours, if not more, just on promoting that show. And we can get this in place for you where your social posts just kind of keep going over and over on a time. And you know people that do this, where there's just like all these automatic posts happening. So if you find yourself being held back in any way from even starting or continuing or growing with a podcast, you need a team. You need my team, and it's way cheaper than it would be for you to even hire a single assistant or a single employee or go to any freelancing site. We want you to just give us some of your podcast episodes and make your podcast happen. And I know what you're thinking. Well, what if I don't have a podcast? And I would say, just off the top of my head, that 80 to 90% of our monthly podcasting clients, we set up the podcast for them. So that means you're not alone. And what setting up a podcast means is that you own it and that you have full control over all the accounts, and you can quit, leave at any time. And it means that you say to us, well, first of all, we get you in that chat room I just showed you. And that means you can communicate with us there. And then you either, and usually you set up the podcasting account. That way you can go to the site, you can click on the create podcast button, you can put in your own billing information. That way you own it, you control it. And then you just give us the password to log in. And the easy answer as far as podcasting is, if you want a podcast for free, Anchor is the place to go. And the only bad thing about this podcasting host called Anchor is that they kind of put their branding on it, and some people don't like that. And if you want to have a podcast that you're in full control over, you use a service called Libsyn. And we can walk you through all this in the chat room later on if you want. But Libsyn is $7 a month, and Libsyn means that you have all kinds of like tracking on how your show goes. They give you a website if you don't even have one of those, but it can also work with your website. And it's $7 a month, and it means that you can keep on adding episodes, and you don't have to pay a huge like storage bill for your hosting, and you don't have to pay a huge bandwidth bill on your hosting either. It's just they say, here's what you can host with us, and it's unlimited storage, and you get like a little bit more every month. And it means that even if you get 100,000 downloads, they won't shut you down or slow you down or ask for any more money. Hosting your podcast files, at least on a podcast host, no one ever talks about that because it's geeky, but you have this podcast host, and it's a way better way than trying to like, I don't know if you ever thought about like hosting on your website, hosting your own podcast, or trying to host your files on like Amazon, how they have like their S3. And even just talking about this, it's getting too deep in the technical details. Anchor or Libsyn. Anchor's free, Libsyn is $7 a month, and that way you can have a podcast that's set up. And if you happen to have a WordPress site, give us the password there. If you happen to have a YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of these platforms, you just give us the login and password. And luckily, in this day and age, let's say the worst happens, you want to kick us out, You can always click on change password, lost password. You do something with your phone to verify yourself. In this day and age, it's impossible for literally anyone to steal anyone's account anytime. As long as you have your phone and your own like personal email, you can always like recover an account if that's the thing that you're worried about. But you basically set up the accounts, give us the passwords, and this way we get to posting. And if you don't have a podcast yet, which I'm assuming that you don't or you've thought about it, we can give you different cover graphics to choose from. And what we do is we say, can you give us like some photos of yourself that you might want to use on a like a square graphic for your podcast, like the podcast cover? Do you want any like kind of like special colors or something like that? And so like for example, one of our clients that comes to mind is this lady, Erin Frame. I haven't seen her in a while. I kind of miss her. And she's a lot of fun, and she's some realtor. She's not the realtor I was mentioning before. She's some other realtor. But like she said, well, I've got this picture of me like in the blue dress, and I want to have like the purple text and the white text. So this is what I'm talking about when I say like a podcast cover. We can kind of give you some options and work with you as fast or as slow as it has to be, as it has to take in order to get the job done. And so we kind of go back and forth to figure out these cover graphics, and then we can write your intro, or we can just get into the podcast show itself, because sometimes it's fun to like have a different announcer to kind of talk you up, and we talk about kind of choices about like different sort of like businessy, corporate-y, rock music, or if you want to try other kinds of music, we can just keep on going back and forth figuring out graphics, music, introductions, all these things where you might even be lost just thinking about what to do next. But now we kind of take you down the path and we say, here's my question. You answer us, and now you're steps further along in having your podcast done. And we're talking about like a few days, which starting now, where you say, here's the logins, we'll figure out the graphics, figure out the music, give us a quick recording. In a few days, you can have your first episode done, which means now your podcast is live, which means now it's on all these podcasting platforms, and you have a podcast, and you didn't have it before. And if you say at that point, okay, I'm done, I want to quit, I never want to pay you monthly again, totally fine. There's no setup fee, there's no anything like that. You can always quit if you want to, but we want to make it so convenient where you never quit and you never want to quit, and you stay as long as you have a podcast, which should be forever, because you should want to stay relevant. You should want to continue networking. You should want to continue having content. You should want to always be having traffic, because consistent traffic means consistent subscribers, consistent buyers. It means recurring revenue. So podcasting, to get these things, means you just show up. And I mean, you can literally right now today sit in your car, because in your car there's like great acoustics and it doesn't look that bad because there's like windows, so the lighting's good. And you kind of hold your phone and you click on the the video sort of button, and you just kind of talk for 5 minutes. And you've seen tons of videos like this on YouTube. Someone sitting in their car, selfie mode on the phone. That can be a podcast episode. That can be your first podcast episode. Before you get all the fancy lighting and the fancy gear, you could hop on Zoom and just be sitting in your office and someone else is in the split screen. I mean, think about how even in the past few years, like a side-by-side Zoom interview, you'd almost never see that on TV, and now it's the norm. So just record on your phone or on Zoom, and then you go on the chat room, and then you click on the attach button, and you just send us the recording. And you can give us the episode and say, and you saw a little bit of, we had, I think it was Brad might say like, publish this now, or publish this next Wednesday. And so we can publish it on whatever schedule you want. You can say, here's like 5 episodes ahead of time. And if you want us to like create a spreadsheet, which we've done for some people in the past, no problem at all if you want it. And we'll say like, here's the podcast title, here's a date it'll be live, here's what we're doing on it now, and we can just be as communicative as you want, so that way you can get back to those boss level activities where you can be thinking about the big picture, your strategy, what else you want to accomplish in your business to make money. If you've heard this term, revenue generating activities, get back to just the revenue generating activities. So that way, a podcast only takes 20 minutes of your time to either record something quick and cool or to interview someone else. But then now my team will be spending the whole rest of that week making your podcast episode get more attention. And can we do each other a favor? Can we just keep it simple? Because as you've even seen a little bit today, it's so tempting to make podcasting this whole crazy thing and all these facets. And instead, what you should be doing is vague booking a prospect's problem. If you want to be known for something, you want someone to pay attention to you, what problem are they having? We'll talk about it. And talk about what your prospects want to talk about and what your competition does not talk about, so that way you can meet people where they're at. You can speak to their fears, no matter how weird or simple those are. Just kind of talk about what needs talking about. And you should only have to show up. So this way you send us the recording, we add the title, narrator, we put it on YouTube, we make podcast notes, that way it can be a blog post or have a YouTube description. We put on still graphics on social media, video clips, bite-sized tweets, promo email. And here's my team as of a couple of months ago. A few people have quit, a few more people have added, but we're currently at 10 people on the team. And one person does the podcast notes, a couple people do the graphics, some do the social posting, but we're not just some brand new operation that we thought up in a weekend. We have tons of people working all day, every day for you at DFYpodcast.com, at Done For You Podcasting. You give us your episodes and we do all these things for you. So we want you to go right now to DFYpodcast.com. I'll get the URL right there on the webpage, DFYpodcast.com. This is where we want you to go. I'll go there right now with you. We go to DFYpodcast.com. DFY stands for Done For You Podcast. And here's the two options, okay? The two options are, if you know what you want right now, then you can click on this podcast production button and get the details. If you want to have a phone call with me, it's not a free call, but we will apply the amount you pay for the call to your future podcasting services. So if you click on that, it pops up a time and a date to meet with me. You click on the time, you click on a date, you fill in your details, and then there's a payment button right here, and then we can meet and talk about you and your podcasting hopes and dreams, talk about your vision. And you can click on this podcast production button here, that's the other option, where we go into all the details about what it is that we're talking about, and we have the different price points. If you're not sure, the middle one is what most people go for. Basically, the way this works is the basic version of this is just if you have some podcast episodes to put out. But the middle option, which is what we want you to be on, is where we also do the posting for social media. So the place to go is DFYpodcast.com. That is doneforyouPodcasting.com. That is DFYpodcast.com. So we want you to go there. We want you to become a podcaster, even though that might be scary right now, awkward right now, but everything is awkward and slightly difficult until it's easy. Everyone that I know that's successful puts themselves out there in this way, even in a small way, even in a podcast where they have people that show up to them to interview, even if they show up to other podcasts. And there's always so many different like outside the box techniques. For example, if you did a coaching call with someone, I don't do this, but you could be doing a coaching call with someone, record the call, and say, can I use this as a podcast episode? You could be on someone else's show as a guest on their show and say, can I also use this as an episode of my show? And at the very least, the thing that has blown me away, impressed me the most with podcasts is that there's so many people that would not otherwise have given me the time of day if it did not lead to them being on a podcast interview. So like they don't want to get on a call just to get to know each other, but they're on my show for 20 minutes to talk about their business. Yes, now they're involved. And we've done all kinds of monetization, like we've made things like compilation books. This is full of my podcast guests who have paid me money for a chapter in my book. I've turned podcast guests into affiliates. I've turned podcast guests into customers. You need to be doing this too. But how do you start? Well, the first step is to go to dfypodcast.com. That way you can create your own podcast. That way you can get your first show created. If you don't like it, no hard feelings. You can always quit at any time. But if you have been thinking, especially lately, that there's just not enough in your business that is in a structure, right? Because usually a business, you think like, people clock in, people, keep the lights running, keep the orders coming in. If there's a lack of reliability, predictability, consistency in your business, the answer for you needs to be podcasting. Your podcast, it means traffic, it means networking, it means content, it means recurring revenue. And that all sounds good to me, and it means less guessing for you. It means that you can show up, record your shows, you can have things to always be talking about, posting, people to contact, and it just grows from there. DFYpodcast.com is the place to go. That is DFYpodcast.com. And I'll see you later, and I'll see you there, and I'll see you in the chat room that I showed you, because once you join as a monthly member of DFY Podcast, then we get the ball rolling on your podcast. And we'll be able to chat one-on-one. And we'll just send these quick messages where you say, here's what the podcast cover I would like. Here's the new podcast episode I have. We say, cool, now your podcast episode is live on Facebook, on Instagram, and we even took out all the ums for you, and we even added music for you. So we will see you in the inside, on the inside, in the inside. What does it matter? DFYpodcast.com, and get to podcasting. Get to podcasting with the help of me and my team. We will see you in there. DFYpodcast.com.